Okay, so in this lab, what we're going to do is create a NAT gateway for a private subnet. As you can see from the diagram here, what we've been doing up until this date is, yes, we've been creating public and private subnets, but for public subnets, for our EC2s, as you can see from the diagram, yes, they have a private IP, but we also been given the EC2 a public IP. And with a public IP, as you can see from the arrow, all it needs is an internet gateway for internet access. Okay? Now, for objects in a private subnet, such as EC2s or databases, and this is a database right here, but we'll use an EC2, right? They have private IP addresses only. And so they're not routable into the internet. And therefore, you just can't use an internet gateway. You have to use what's called a NAT gateway, which stands for network address translation. So the concept behind this is with your private IP, you go through a NAT gateway, which has a permanent elastic public IP, and with that elastic permanent public IP, it goes out to the internet gateway and then out to the internet. It's the same concept you have going at home. If you got a laptop at home, it has a private IP, right? And so, but you have whether a Comcast, AT&T, or whatever your internet service provider is, you have a home router. Well, that home router is acting as a NAT gateway because your devices inside your home have private IPs. So one of the benefits of a NAT gateway is that you only need one public IP address, and you could have many devices with private IP address in private subnets or at your home, for example. And that's one benefit. You don't need, if you placed everything in a public subnet and gave it a public IP address, right, you would have many, many public IP addresses. And of course, you have to pay for those public IPs. But with private subnets, right, you only need one public IP, right? And that resides on the NAT gateway. It does a conversion. It converts private IP into that public IP and therefore can go to the internet gateway. Okay, that's one benefit. The second benefit, obviously, is security. Because look at it this way, the rest of the world cannot see these private subnets. They don't even know that they exist. The only thing the outside world knows about is that public IP address, right, that would reside on the NAT gateway. Yes, we have a public subnet here. It knows about the public IP that would reside on this instance as well. But just pretend this public subnet didn't exist and all we had is private subnets. It's invisible, right, to the outside internet. Again, all they see is a single public IP address on the NAT gateway. So again, that's another benefit of using network address translation. So we're going to go ahead and get started and create this lab. We'll create a VPC, we'll create a public subnet and two private subnets, and we'll put EC2 instances in each of these subnets. The EC2 instance in the public subnet will have a public IP. It will only need an internet gateway. However, the EC2 instances in the private subnet will need a NAT gateway. Now, this NAT gateway will belong to the public subnet. That's one thing to keep in mind. You never put NAT gateways in private subnets. They go into the public subnet. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm in the console already. I'm going to key in VPC. And we're going to select Create VPC. I may go fast this time because you should be familiar with it. So if I'm going too fast, by all means, you can pause the video. Okay, we're going to select VPC only. We'll give it a name. We'll call it Lab VPC. We'll use 172.16.0.0/16 as the parent network address for that entire virtual private cloud. Tennessee will leave as default. I explained what that is. You're sharing space via virtualization on a server within the Amazon data center versus having something dedicated, which would be more costly. So we'll select Create VPC. VPC's created. Now we'll create our 3 subnets. We'll select Lab VPC. First subnet will be public 1. Everything's going to go in the same availability zone. So as you can see from the diagram, right, we have a singular availability zone this time. Okay. Now, if you had 2 availability zones, right, and you had private subnets in a different availability zone, they could still point to the same NAT gateway. Okay. If you really want to achieve redundancy and fault tolerance, then you could just mirror this availability zone, copy the same configuration, and place it in availability zone B. All right, so we've got the public, we got the name, US East 1. It will have an address of 172.16.1.0/24. Click Create. And we'll create the 2 private subnets. This will be called Private 1. Again, availability zone East 1A, 172.16.2.0/24. Create subnet. And the last one will be the second private subnet. We'll call it Private 2. US East 1A, 172.16.3.0. And we'll select Create Subnet. Okay. Now you have your VPCs here, and you have your subnets. It may take a second for them to load. Let me hit refresh. There you go. Okay, for some reason I'm short one. No, never mind. I got a public 1, a private 1, and a private 2. If you want to delete the others, because they can be annoying, cause confusion, just select Delete Subnet here. Okay, it's not allowing me to delete the default subnets. That's fine. Okay, what happened to my other ones? Click on VPCs, subnets. Hope I didn't delete the 3rd private subnet by mistake. Yeah, because I only see 2 of them, so I may have to create that 3rd one. So I'll name it private subnet 2, 1A, and what do we say? 172.16.3.0/24. Oh, it's already there for some reason. It's just not showing up. Okay, that's weird. These are all the part of the default subnet. Okay, never mind. Been a long day. Okay, they're all there. Okay, you were probably like wondering, move on, you got it, you got it. Okay, so we got our subnets created. I'm not going to redo the lab. It's good to know that stuff happens sometimes, and right, even I get hung up sometimes. Okay, so got your VPC, you got your subnet. Next thing to do is create an internet gateway. And this is simply called Lab IGW. And that's all you got to do. And that's good. And attach it to a VPC. Okay, so it's attached to a VPC. Now, what we want to do is go to our route table. because this is something we're going to be working on, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to end up creating both a public and private route table, right? Instead of everything going under one route table, we'll click on this and we'll call this the public route table. Now, this is for the EC2 instance that's in the public subnet. All it needs, right, if you click on the route table ID, okay, it's got a local route to everything inside the VPC. But what we want to do is make a subnet association for only the public subnet, okay, not the private ones. And we're going to select Save Associations, okay, so you can click on it and see that it's there, okay, and go back to Route Table. Click on the Route Table ID, and then what we want to do is edit the routes, okay, and we have a local route. We want to add a route for any IP address, send it to the Internet Gateway, right, and you send it to the lab, and you save changes. Okay, now we got our private subnets, right? What we need to do is we're actually setting up the infrastructure before we put the EC2's in there, okay? What we also want to do is we want to create a NAT Gateway, and then afterwards we are going to create a private route table that says for the private instances, anything not in my route table, don't send it to the Internet Gateway, send it to the NAT Gateway. But we need to create the NAT Gateway first. So we click on NAT Gateways, and we'll select Create, and we'll give it a name. We'll call it Lab-NAT-Gateway. Okay, it needs to go in the public subnet, right? So you click on Public 1. Okay, it's public. We got to allocate an elastic IP, right? This is a permanent IP. We'll delete it when the lab's done. Otherwise, if you left this running, you would incur costs, whether you're using the free tier or using the Learner Lab provided by the AWS Academy. Okay, and then after you do the elastic IP, just click Create NAT Gateway. All right, and then it's going to take a while for the state to become active, okay? However, while that is pending, we should be able to complete the route table and attach the NAT Gateway to it, okay? So let's go to Route Tables, and we're going to select Create a Route Table, and we're going to name this Private Route-Table. And we're going to put it in our lab VPC, and we're going to select Create. Okay? Now notice we're given a local route to anything in the VPC, which is good, right? Everybody can communicate with each other in the entire VPC, whether it's in a public or private subnet, via the 172.16.0.0/16 address. Now what we need to do is make our subnet associations. We want to add both private subnets, private 1 and private 2, and then you want to click Save Associations. Okay? And then from here, we'll go back to our route tables. Okay? And we got a public and a private. We want to select the private, and we want to click on the Routes tab. Again, select the private route table. Click on the Routes tab, right? And you want to click Edit Routes. And we want to add that quad 0 address for anything not in my routing table, right? And then send it to, not the Internet Gateway, the NAT Gateway. And you click in the box and you select the Lab NAT Gateway, and you select Save Changes. Okay? Now what we want to do, that NAT Gateway should be up and running. It's still pending, that's okay. So if we look at the topology, we've actually set everything up, right? Look at the green, we set up our VPC, right? And then look at the shaded boxes. We created a public subnet 1, then we created 2 private subnets, private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Notice the network address is assigned to the public and private subnets. They match what we've been doing in the lab, right? We created an internet gateway. We attached the internet gateway to the VPC, right? And now anything in the public subnet has a quad zero route, which means the internet, send it to the NAT gateway. Internet gateway. And then we have private subnets, right? We did two subnet associations that says anything not in my routing table, which is basically the quad zero internet, send it to the NAT gateway. And you can see the private subnet sends it to the NAT gateway, private subnet 2 sends it to the NAT gateway, and then the NAT gateway sends it to the internet gateway. Okay, but this NAT gateway is associated with the public subnet. Okay, so we've done that. I'm going to refresh this. Good. Okay, the gateway's available. Now we can create our EC2 instances and go ahead and put them in there. So we're going to click on EC2. And for instances running, we have 0, right? So we're going to select Launch Instance. And we're going to give it a name. We'll call it Public 1, Public Server 1. Okay. We'll use Amazon Linux, free tier eligible, T2 micro. We're going to create a key pair, and we're going to call this Lab Gateway. And we want to make sure we select PPK, and then we want to go ahead and create a key pair. Okay, and it goes into your downloads folder. We want to edit the network settings. We want to assign it to our lab VPC. Make sure it's in the public subnet. We want to enable the auto-assigned public IP. Okay, and from here we want to create a security group. Okay, and so the security group is going to be the same for all servers, whether they're public or private. We want to test it, so we're basically going to allow everything in. We're going to give it a name. We'll call it servers -SG. Okay, and we'll just copy and paste that in the description. Okay, now we're going to allow SSH because we'll need to be able to SSH, and we got a quad 0 there, which is good. Okay, then we want to add another rule. We want to allow all traffic, and we want to say from anywhere quad 0. So it's basically an open firewall, open security group for testing purposes, right? In the real world, you would only allow probably SSH from certain IPs, and then you'd be specific based on what type of ports should be open on those servers, what type of traffic should be allowed. Okay, and that should do it. So we got the inbound rule 1 and 2. Okay, and the outbound rule should be allowing everything as well. And I believe all we need to do is launch that instance. Okay, and then we'll go back to EC2. And we'll launch the first private. What was the name? How do we name them? Public server 1, so it should be private server 1 and then private server 2. So we'll go back to launch instances. We'll call it private server 1. And we'll select Linux, Amazon Linux AMI, T2 micro again. Okay, we want to select the lab NAT Gateway key pair. Click Edit, Network Settings, make sure it's in the lab VPC. Place it in the first private subnet, okay? We're going to leave auto-assign public IP to disable. It's only going to have a private IP. We're going to select the existing security group, which is the servers SG. Okay, and from there we can launch that instance. Okay, and then finally, we'll go ahead and create a third instance. Click on instances, okay? If you hit refresh, right, both initializing, go to launch instances. This will be private server 2, okay? Again, Amazon Linux, Linux 2023, T2 Micro. Select the Lab NAT Gateway key pair. Go to Edit Network Settings. Okay, now again, select your Lab VPC. And you want to place it in the private subnet 2. So you want to make sure private 2 is selected. Again, leave auto assign public IP to disable. Select an existing security group. And select servers SG. Okay, and then from there, you're going to launch the instance. Okay, so you got 3 instances running. What we're going to do is, first of all, on that public server, let's open up a notepad document and copy these public IPs. Okay, we're going to click on the public server 1. You see how there's a public IP here? Let's copy that. I'll put public server 1. Copy that public IP, but also has a private IP, right? So click on that, and then we'll paste it in Notepad. And then we'll go to private server 1. And we'll click on it, click on the instance ID. Now notice it doesn't have a public IP, right? Click on the private IP. And we will paste that in there, and then we'll go to our last instance, private server 2, and click on the private IP. Okay, so we're waiting for those instances to launch, okay? Now in a previous lab, right, I told you to download PuTTY and Pageant, okay? And when you download Pageant, okay, it's not on mine, but I can simply, if I open it up, if I type Pageant in here, if I just click on it, okay, it will appear here, and then I have PuTTY. And I gave you a previous lab to download them. I mean, you can just go to PuTTY. Download PuTTY and Pageant. Okay, and it should be right here. Here's your Pageant. You want to click on that exe, right? And you want to download it for maybe 64-bit. And then also you want to click on PuTTY. You should have downloaded it from a previous lab. What we need to do, and let me pull this back up. What we need to do is my topology. I need to go back. Here we go. Click on instances. Okay, what we need to do, we'll SSH into the public server via its public IP. You can't SSH remotely into the private server 1 or 2 because they only have private IPs. But what we can do is hop from the public server 1, for example, to the private server, right, via its internal private IP address. Okay, and again, that local route table for 172.16.0.0 allows us to do it. So if we examine one more time the route tables, okay, for the private route table, if you click on routes, right, we are going through the NAT Gateway, And for the public route, we are going through the, if I click on routes here, we're going through the Internet Gateway. Now, if you click on your VPCs, click on your VPC, all right, click on the resource map and you can visualize it. You can see how it's actually working, right? So the public subnet through the public route table, and you can see the connection through the Internet Gateway. And then the two private ones via the private route table through the lab NAT Gateway, okay? And so these EC2s should be ready by now. We got 3 instances running. Okay, great. Now we can SSH into all of them, all right? So what we want to do is first go to Pageant. And again, it'll be a little icon there with the hat on it. Right-click on it and select Add Key. And the key you want to add is the key we just did, the Lab NAT Gateway key. Click on it, open it up, and that's all you need to do for Pageant. Then you go into your notepad. Let's copy the public IP for the public server. Click on PuTTY, which is the 2 computers, right? Paste in the public IP, then go down to SSH and click AUTH. Put a check mark on Allow Agent Forwarding. And then click on Credentials. Click Browse. And double click on that Lab Gateway key. And all you got to do is click Open. Okay, and then you click Accept. And to log in, the default login, right, for Amazon EC2s, you should know it's EC2 user, right? And then you're logged in. Okay, now you should have internet access because again, you're in the public subnet here and you're going through the Internet Gateway. You have access to the internet and you could test it, right? You could type wget www.google.com, right? And you get the public IP for it, right? And you can ping it. Ping 64.233.180.106, right? And you're getting echo replies. Now what we want to do is hop from this EC2 into this EC2 in the private subnet. And then once we're logged in into the EC2 on the private subnet, which only has a private IP, we want to make sure that the NAT gateway is working. All right, and this connection to the Internet Gateway and the Internet actually works. Okay, so to do that, you type SSH, try that again. EC2 user, type the username. So SSH space EC2 user, make the @ symbol. And then what you want to do is copy that private IP from the private server 1, right? So copy the private server 1's private IP, paste it in there, and hit enter. And then you get the question, are you sure you want to continue? You type yes. And you can tell by the IP address, now you're logged into the EC2 instance in the private subnet 1. Okay? Now you could test, see if you have Internet Gateway. Again, type that same command, wget, all one word. This time type facebook.com or www.facebook.com. Okay, and you get a resolve. You ping the address, and you can see the address up here. You type ping 31.13.66.35. Hit enter, and your NAT gateway is working perfectly. Okay? So, and you could do the same with the other instance as well. But that's how it works. The lab, it works just fine now. And as you can see, even though the EC2 instance in the private subnet has only a private IP address, it has internet accessibility through the NAT gateway. Okay. Now, what we need to do is break the lab down. Okay. It's very important we break the lab down. I'm going to close the putty session and we're going to remove everything. And obviously, we want to start with the elastic IP first. So if you type elastic IP and scroll down under features and click on elastic IPs, come on. There it is, right? We have one. Click on it, and under actions, select release elastic IP addresses. Oh, okay. I got to delete the NAT gateway first. No problem. So just type NAT gateway. Okay. Click on our single gateway, go to actions and select delete NAT gateway. You can confirm that with a delete. And it's in the process of being deleted. Okay. And while we're waiting for that, you can go to your EC2 instances. And we actually have 3 of them. You can select all of them, go to instance date, and go to terminate instance. Okay, and those will shut down and terminate. Okay, and we'll go back to our NAT gateway. It may not be fully deleted yet or removed. It's deleting. Let's see if we can get the elastic IP released. Type elastic IP. Okay, we'll try it again. Click on it under actions, select release elastic IP. There you go. Okay, that's good. You want to make sure that you have nothing in here, right? No elastic IPs in your region. Okay, now let's make sure the NAT gateway should be deleted by now. Okay, it's deleted. That's good. Okay, it's going to take a while for that to stay in there. It'll clear out after a few hours, but it's been deleted. Now what you want to do is go to your internet gateway. Okay, select your lab IGW under actions and select attach from VPC. Okay, this is your default VPC. That's fine. And hopefully those instances have been terminated. So we should go to your VPCs. Make sure you have a check mark on the lab VPC. And under actions, select delete VPC. And you can confirm that with a delete. So we break the lab down. Okay. So that's it, right? The subnets, that removes the subnets, okay? And it will remove the route tables. Okay, they're gone. Okay, your internet gateway's gone. And that pretty much concludes the lab to make sure. Like you can always sign out of your AWS account. And if you're using the Academy Learner Lab, you could select End Lab, hit yes, and select Reset, and select yes. And then you can be rest assured, right, we're not going to be charged $1 million. I'm just kidding. Okay. So I hope everybody enjoyed the lab. Take care.